Welcome to the Environmental Justice Lab. I am your host, Dr. Leslie Joseph. Thank you so much for joining me. We are talking about prisons and prisoners. I know it's been a few weeks since I've spoken to you, but I'm glad to be back. And we're going to talk about what I just saw in the paper today. So I work at the University of South Carolina as a research assistant professor, and I'm walking through the door, and on the ground in front of the door is a copy of the newspaper. I don't know if you've read the newspaper in a while. I have not, but there was a newspaper, and that newspaper had a headline. And the headline says, I'm going to read it to you now. It says, "Feds coming after South Carolina jails." And then the byline is, "Feds launch civil rights investigations into jails in Charleston and Richland counties." Now, those of you who don't know, if you're not from South Carolina, Richland County is where the capital city is located. It's the second largest county in South Carolina. Charleston County is the third largest county in South Carolina. And these jails are currently under federal investigation because of how they're being operated and managed, and because people are dying in those prisons and in those jails. And so the Department of Justice on the national level is coming to South Carolina and investigating these jails. And I promise you, they're going to find the same things that we've been talking about throughout our series on prisons. And so on this episode, we're going to talk about this investigation into these jails. We're going to talk about all the things that relate to why jails are so horrible in the first place. And we're going to just wrap this whole series up by reminding you that prisoners are people. Right here on the Environmental Justice Lab podcast. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Environmental Justice Lab podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Leslie Joseph. Thank you so much for joining me. And I want to talk about a newspaper article that I read. I don't know the last time I've read the newspaper, but when I walked in to work yesterday at the University of South Carolina, on the floor was a newspaper, a stack of newspapers. I picked one up because the headline was so jarring. I had to pick it up and read it. The headline said, "Feds coming after South Carolina jails." And so I had to read this newspaper article to see what was going on, because we've been talking about jails for the last couple of months, about how prisoners are an environmental justice community who needs protection, who needs advocacy and activism. And so I was interested to see what is happening in South Carolina. So I opened up this newspaper to read about it. And so when I started reading, the next headline says, "Feds launch civil rights investigation into jails in Charleston and Richland counties." Richland County is where the capital city of South Carolina is located. That would be Columbia. I'm in that county. That's where the University of South Carolina is located. I'm in Richland County right now. Charleston County is the third largest county in South Carolina, very popular, on the coast, nice beaches, nice restaurants, very nice place to live, but apparently a horrible place to go to jail if you find yourself down there. And so the feds are investigating the jails in these two counties. And there are some serious issues that this article outlines. I want to just highlight them for you, just to get us thinking about why the Department of Justice for the United States of America would come to South Carolina, this little state, and investigate the jails there. And so in Charleston County, this newspaper says that federal officials will investigate the provision of medical and mental health care, the use of solitary confinement, the use of force, and whether the jail discriminates against inmates with psychiatric disabilities. So in Charleston County, the accusations are that they're not providing health care the way they should. They're discriminating against people who have disabilities, and that they're using force and solitary confinement, which is another form of force, in a harmful, apparently potentially illegal way. And so that is happening in Charleston County. And if you've listened to this podcast at all, you know that those kinds of things happen all over the country. It is not new. The idea that people don't have the healthcare that they need when they're behind bars in prison is well documented. The lack of mental health care, well documented. I would argue that people who have mental health conditions shouldn't even be in prisons. They should have specialized facilities where they can get the actual care that they need, because I'm pretty sure that the reason they're even in jail to begin with is because they acted in a way that was consistent with their mental health illness. Obviously, we want to treat those illnesses like any other illness, heal it, and restore the individual. And I promise you that is not going to happen inside of a jail cell at all. So clearly, if this jail was asked to provide that kind of care, it is woefully insufficiently doing so. And that's in Charleston. Richland County, the newspaper goes on and says that in Richland County, the investigation will examine whether the jail fails to protect inmates from violence and subjects them to dangerous living conditions. So we got something else going on in Richland County. Now we have violence permeating through the jails in Richland County to such a degree that the Department of Justice is coming in to investigate. Now, it's interesting, in the same newspaper, the article below it, below where the investigation is discussed, the headline reads, "Inmate stabbed at Richland County Jail as incidents and lawsuits pile up." So clearly, this is an issue where in the same newspaper, we have the one article about the investigation. At the same time, we have an incident which is predicating the investigation happening at the same time. That's what's going on in these jails. And it's up to the people who are running the facility to protect the people who are inside, to protect them from violence, protect them from these dangerous living conditions, protect them from all of the issues that we are reading about and hearing about and seeing in these prisons. That is what should be happening. And clearly it's gotten so bad and there's been so much inaction for so long that the Department of Justice is intervening to investigate and to deal with the situation. Think about this. This article says that in January 2021, a gentleman named Jamal Sutherland, who was a mental health patient at the facility, died after deputies used pepper spray, stun guns, and physical force to drag him out of his cell to attend a bond hearing. They killed this man. Killed him in an effort to get him to appear in court. This is at a facility where they knew he had mental health challenges. They knew that he was not well. And instead of bringing in experts and people who could actually address his mental health condition, they resorted to physical violence to get him to comply. And guess what happened? He died. He absolutely died. Here's another story from the same article. A gentleman named D'Angelo Dontrell Brown died of septic shock in December of 2022, that's last year, after deputies found him unconscious in an isolation cell soiled with his own feces. It says the 28-year-old father of two languished for months in an isolation cell as his untreated schizophrenia worsened. The coroner ruled his death a homicide due to gross medical neglect. Okay, so fine. You don't have the mental health care personnel you need in the facility. Okay, I understand it. It shouldn't be that way, but I get it. You leave this person alone. You've never checked on him for, what does it say? It said months. For months, you've never checked in. You've never made sure he's eating. never make sure he's hygienic. You don't even know his condition. And you just found him there one day, dead, covered in his own fecal matter. I mean, this is just ridiculous. And this should not happen anywhere in the world. And yet it's happening here in South Carolina, where I live. I live here. I live in this state. This is what's happening here. This is what we have to deal with. This is what's going on in prisons that are funded by the taxes that we pay and who are represented by the people that we elect. This is happening here. I mean, it's inexcusable. It's inexcusable. Here's another story. This is all in Charleston County. Padarvis is representing the family of a 50-year-old man. This man is 50 years old, who died in the medical ward in Charleston County Jail in March. Medical staff disregarded 2 outside doctors' recommendations to hospitalize just days before he died from heart and renal failure in the jail, according to the documents provided. So you had doctors tell you what needed to happen, what was required, what they needed to do to protect this man. And the staff said, we're not going to do that. We're going to just leave him here. He'll be fine. Don't worry about it. And then he dies. Like this person died. He's 50 years old. That's not old at all. I can't imagine any institution where that would happen still being allowed to function and be open. I mean, this is outrageous. It's outrageous. Here's another story from the article. The same article. This is the same article. This is why they're launching an investigation into this jail system in Charleston and Richland counties, because of these incidences. And these are just the ones that they're sharing in the newspaper. I'm sure there's hundreds of them. That's why they have an investigation. There's hundreds of these situations. Here's another one. Lasan Butler died in February 2022 in his cell from acute hydration. The coroner ruled the death a homicide, saying the jail staff failed to give Butler adequate food and liquid or routine hydration therapy before his death. So you mean to tell me you're not giving this individual food and water to the point where he's dying in the cell? That's what we have going on here? That's what we're doing in this county, in this state? And I'm sure across the country and across the world, we are making it very clear with these incidences that we don't care about people who are incarcerated whatsoever. You wouldn't allow this to happen to anyone else under any circumstance in any other institution. You wouldn't allow it. You wouldn't. You wouldn't allow animals to go without being fed or being given water or having their living areas cleaned up and having all the fecal matter removed. You wouldn't even let an animal deal with that. But yet this is what we have here in this jail system. This is just ridiculous. This is just ridiculous. You know, I'm reading this article and it talks about how, you know, the DOJ, when they do their investigation, if they find any violations, they can make recommendations to resolve the violations before it takes legal action. You know what? Don't wait for all that. Go ahead and take legal action. People are dying. People are not getting the care that they need. People are living in conditions that are unimaginable. This is not the time for suggestions or recommendations or reports or suggestions to jail officials and staff. I need the DOJ to come in and really make changes and require these changes to be made and to ensure that we don't have this kind of stuff happening in our jails in South Carolina or anywhere in this country or anywhere in this world for as far as I'm concerned. I mean, what are we doing? What are we doing? We spent the last few episodes, we're talking about where, these jails are built and what's around them and what's inside of them and how it's, unsafe where they build these jails because of the environment around them, the pollution and contamination. And we talk about how bad the water is, how there's no sanitation and all these different issues that are clearly environmental issues that need to be addressed, that are easy to fix. It just takes a little bit of courage to just go in and do it. And okay, I'm fine documenting all of that. We talk about it and it's no problem. But when you talk about how people are actually being treated, how they're actually being viewed by the staff, and how you don't even look at these individuals as real people. You don't take care of them. You don't treat their illnesses. You don't feed them. You don't hydrate them. You don't keep them from fighting and killing each other when they're in the jails, when they're in the prisons. You just allow mayhem to ensue because you couldn't care one bit whether or not that inmate lives or that inmate dies. That's when I have a problem. That's when it goes far beyond just policy changes and funding issues. Because there's no reason why one person working in that jail can't look at the inmate, see a problem, and help that person. Just help them. They need help, you help them. You check in. You ensure that they're safe, that they're not harming themselves or other people. That's a basic function. Because they're still people in the end. They're still people who have families, they have children, they have parents, they have siblings, people that care about them and that really want them to get better and really want them to be in a position where they can leave that jail a better person and re-enter society and do some good in the world and be a positive influence. That's what we want to see. But we're not going to if the people who are in the prison running the place are unwilling to view them that way and just allow them to just languish in their mental illness, languish in their hunger and their thirst, and just allow them to fight each other out of anger and out of all the desperation that they probably feel because they're in there to begin with, without helping them at all. It's really frustrating. And it's really upsetting to think about the fact that I live in a state that's in a country, that's in a world that would treat somebody like that would allow somebody to be treated that way. They're a person. You wouldn't treat your worst enemy that you saw in a ditch like that. You wouldn't. Nobody would. And we have people in these prisons and in these jails who just don't care. You don't care about people. You look at them, they come to you because they've committed a crime, they've broken a law, they've been found guilty. They come to your jail and you look at them like they're nothing. Like they're absolutely worthless, not even people. I almost say worthless people, not even people in your mind. And so you don't care at all about how they're treated, what they eat, what they drink, where they sleep, what they do on a day-to-day basis. And ultimately they get killed or they die because of your negligence and because of your indifference to their suffering and to the condition that they live in. And I'm talking to whoever is running these facilities that are being investigated by the Department of Justice. I'm talking to you specifically. That's why this is happening. It used to be, you would complain that it's too hot. I don't have enough food. I can't eat this stuff. This is so difficult. I have a hard time living here. And you can complain and complain, issue complaints and talk to your lawyers. They send the complaints up and of course nothing happens. Now people are dying. They're dying in the prison. And they're dying over and over and over again in the prison. And they're dying so often that now elected officials and attorneys general and the people who represent us have to do something, and all they can do is ask the federal government to come in and investigate. They can't make changes on their own. They can't do anything else but ask the federal government to come in and intervene. That's how bad it's gotten. We already talked about how disproportionate the population is in prisons. There's a long history of injustice, a long history of discrimination, a long history of simple ignorance when it comes to the ways in which certain parts of our population are dealt with and incarcerated, right? I mean, the book is called The New Jim Crow. It's not a coincidence that it's called that. Just like we had Jim Crow laws back then that discriminated and that created second-class and third-class citizens in our country, we have a criminal justice system and a jail system that perpetuates those same issues in the legal sense. And so now you have these prisons populated with people who disproportionately represent a small minority of the population in the prison, primarily Black people, Hispanic people, low-income people, immigrants in immigrant detention centers, all in this system. It's already bad enough. And now you put on top of that the ways in which these facilities are ran and operated, the sheer indifference that is given, that is shown to the people that are living in those conditions, living in those facilities. And now you add that to the fact that people are dying in there. They're dying. And I really hope that when the Department of Justice investigates, I hope they do two things. One, they better put out a nice, thick report on what they find. I want to read it, all of it. I want to know what they find in these jails in South Carolina. I want to know what they've been hearing from the people who work in there. I want to know what they hear from the people who live in there. I want to hear all of that. I want all the information. I want to see the report. Second, and more importantly, I need real changes, real actionable changes to how these prisons and these jails are operated and ran, and real accountability for those who don't uphold their part of the deal by ensuring that the people who live there have their basic human rights and dignity upheld. I mean, this is real basic. We're talking about water and food and being able to breathe and not dying from heat exhaustion or heat stroke, or not being sentenced to death because you got sick while you were there. This is ridiculous. This is insane. We should not ever have a situation where an institution has people within it who are treated this way. It should not happen. And the first thing I would change is how we deal with people who have documented mental illness. Because there's one thing that was said in this article by one of the officials that I actually do agree with. This person said, I invite the elected officials of South Carolina to do their job and to do their part to stop dumping the mentally ill in jails. And I would agree with her. She runs one of the prisons. She's being investigated. I'm sure she's saying a lot of other things too that aren't relevant. But she's right about that one. Prison and jail is not the place for someone with a mental illness. It's just not. It never has been, and it never will be, because people who run those facilities are not trained to deal with those kinds of issues. It's not just getting them their medicine. It's not just making sure they have a place to sleep, but it's actually monitoring their interaction, monitoring their behavior, and understanding what they're dealing with, and understanding how you need to intervene when things go to the left. People in law enforcement and police officers and correctional officers don't know how to deal with that. They're not trained to. They were never asked to. So we shouldn't expect them to. And when people die as a result of their inability to deal with those kind of issues and those illnesses, it shouldn't be surprising. We shouldn't be allowing that to continue over and over again. We need to have an actual healthcare system that allows for us to deal with people who have mental illness. We need to have a system in place where People with documented mental health issues, or people who are going through a mental health crisis, can have a place to go where they can get treated and they can actually be taken care of in a way that's responsible and equitable. That should happen. It shouldn't be a situation where the person with schizophrenia is in the same facility as the other person who is convicted of whatever crime they committed, or this person who's convicted of some other drug-related offense. Like, these people shouldn't all be in the same place. We need to have real targeted interventions to help people. That's how you deal with the community. And I'm telling you, prisoners are an environmental justice community. They have issues and concerns and needs that are not being addressed, that are not being confronted by the people who have the resources and who have the responsibility of protecting them. They don't, because if you did, you would look at your mental health patients and you would treat them differently than you treat other people. You would make sure everybody has their basic necessities met and needs met, and you would be helping to rehabilitate them so that when they leave, when they finish their sentence, they're better off than they were when they got there. Versus now, if they even get out, they're much worse off, and the idea of coming back to prison gets higher and higher and higher. This is a problem. I said last time that this is not a criminal justice podcast, and I don't have a background in criminal justice reform or criminology or public policy or anything like that. And so I don't have the correct policy answers to the crisis that we're seeing. Hopefully the Department of Justice brings something notable and things change. But what I do know is the environmental justice side. And that side is very easy and very simple. You get people what they need to live as humans, as people. Clean water to drink, clean air to breathe, food to eat that won't kill them, sanitation so you can go to the bathroom and prevent the spread of diseases, instead of having fecal matter all over your face when you're in isolation. These things are simple. They're very simple, and they're basic. And no matter who you are, what you've done with your life, you as a human being are entitled to those things. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. That because you committed a crime or you were convicted of a felony, that you are all of a sudden undeserving of having a place to take a shower, or clean water to drink, or food that you can get down into your stomach. Like, you are a person like the rest of us, and you should have those things. It shouldn't even be up for debate. And we shouldn't have situations where people aren't getting the health care that they need, or getting the care that they need while they're in jail or in prison. And so I imagine that there's newspapers like this all around the country with these same stories. That there's mothers and fathers all around the country dealing with the same issues, dealing with the same problems. People who are struggling with mental health illness, not knowing if they're going to make it through the day because where they find themselves leaves them vulnerable, not just internally, physically, but with people around them not being protected. I know this is a problem that goes all across the country, all across the world. And so, to the many of you who are listening, who may be reading the same stories that I'm reading where you live, reading about the same kinds of instances where you live, where I live, we all read them, we all see them. Keep advocating. Keep speaking out. Because at least in South Carolina, that brought on a Department of Justice investigation into these jails, into these prisons, and hopefully it will bring about some really positive changes and positive results. It's only because of your advocacy, because of our speaking up, that we actually get justice, the true justice for people, where people can actually have what they need and be able to live lives that are worth living, even behind bars. Your life isn't over. There's still hope for you. There's still more to life. There's still more you can do, more you can be. And it shouldn't be cut short because the people who are running the facilities are disregarding you and disregarding your humanity as you stay there. So please continue to use your voice to speak out for those who have no voice. And I think when we do that, we can be a part of making this world a better place for everyone who lives in it. For everyone. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening. We are for the people and for the planet. I will see you next time.